A little over a year ago, I purchased the Red KOMODO, and I've absolutely loved the camera. In fact, just recently I picked up a second one just because of how much I like the camera. It fits my needs almost perfectly, and I've really enjoyed the camera. I've used it on a number of different projects, traveled with it, taken it all over the country on numerous different projects and numerous different types of environments, and I've just been really happy with it. So I figured now is as good a time as any to kind of share my thoughts about it with everyone here on the internet. So I'm going to talk about some of the things I like about it, and as with any camera, it's not a perfect camera, so I'll talk about just a couple of things that I don't like about it. But let's stay positive and start with the good stuff first. All right, first up is the global shutter, and this was like the main attraction to me for purchasing this camera, and it's really the main reason why I purchased the camera in the first place. I got a couple of clients that are in the tactical industry, so, you know, filming handheld and doing a lot of, you know, fast movements and stuff like that. The global shutter really helps because you don't get that jello effect that you would with a typical rolling shutter sensor, which is really awesome. And the other thing is just like how it's really subtle, but I just really like how the motion is captured. Something about the motion cadence with this camera is just really special and unique, and I guess kind of filmic. I mean, it's the closest thing digitally that you can kind of get to capture like film, because film is kind of basically a global shutter. So it's just something really subtle but really special about the motion cadence that I really like about the KOMODO that you just can't really get on a camera like an A7S or FX6 or, you know, C70 or something like that. One of the great things about Red cameras is the R3D codec, the REDCODE RAW. And the great thing about it is it's supported in pretty much every major editor out there. And that's really important because, well, for me, not a really huge deal because I pretty much primarily edit in DaVinci Resolve, but also sometimes I might have to jump into Final Cut Pro for whatever reason, and it's really nice to be able to just know that I can jump into any editor that I want to, that I need to be able to complete the project and not have to transcode or anything like that. But on the flip side, a lot of times I'll get hired out as like a DP or cam op or something like that. And if the production company is using Red in the productions, I can bring along my KOMODO and add that as a rental item, which is really cool. But it gives that production company a lot of confidence knowing that they're getting the same codec as the rest of the Red cameras, or if I'm just supplying the camera for the project and it's being sent out to an editor, I know the editor's not going to have any problems with support with whatever editor they're using, because that the R3D codec is pretty much widely adapted to every major NLE out there. And another really great thing about the R3D codec is in Red CineX Pro, you can actually trim R3D files after they've been loaded onto your hard drive. You can trim these R3D files down to kind of save on hard drive space and everything. And I've got a video kind of how to do that using DaVinci Resolve and Red CineX Pro. It's a really cool way to kind of save on hard drive space. So if you're not familiar with that, maybe check that video out and you can kind of see what I'm talking about. Now, one thing Red is known for in all their cameras is having really accurate colors right out of the box, and the KOMODO is no exception to that. And the great thing with that is starting with accurate colors is number one, you're pretty confident that all of your colors are accurate as long as your white balance and everything is set properly, which you can do in post if you're in R3D, which is really nice. But that plus having that 16-bit color, all that color information is really nice because you can kind of manipulate that image to kind of look however you want, and it's really beneficial if you're using it to match to other cameras. Say you've got like a Canon R5 as your stills camera and you need to use it as your B camera. Having that R3D codec is really easy to kind of match to that Canon, or maybe you got a Sony, whatever the case may be. Being able to manipulate all those colors is really easy out of that R3D codec, so that's really nice. But if you also want to, like, you know, emulate a film stock or something like that, it's really easy to do with the KOMODO because of how much color information is in there. And the other thing with the IPP2 color pipeline matching to other Red cameras is really easy. And say you're like working on a mini doc and you license footage, you know, from ArtGrid or something like that, and you download the raw files. When you're in the IPP2 color pipeline, it's really easy to kind of integrate that footage, and it all looks like it was shot on the same camera because of how those colors and everything are, color science is pretty much the same among all the cameras, so it's really easy to kind of get a consistent look through your whole project, whether you're licensing footage or filming the footage yourself, which is awesome. And all that good color information paired with the 6K sensor just delivers amazing image quality, in my opinion. I love the fact that it just looks really detailed. It doesn't look sharp, just looks really detailed, which is nice for like product stuff and all that kind of stuff. And if you pair it with like a really sharp lens, like, you know, the Canon RF lenses or something, you can get a really nice, crisp, detailed image, which is great for product stuff. But, you know, if you want to use vintage glass or even, you know, some more modern glass and throw on a Hollywood Black Magic or something like that, you can kind of get, you know, a more filmic look, if you will, which is awesome. So you have a lot of flexibility with the Komodo sensor, and I think it's pretty similar with most of the other RED cameras, but it's pretty cool that you can get that similar image for $6,000 US or whatever the Komodo costs, as opposed to $30,000. So pretty big bonus there. Now, one thing that really surprised me with the Komodo was the dynamic range. Being that it's a global shutter sensors typically take a hit on dynamic range, but somehow RED was able to still have a ton of dynamic range in the sensor. And a lot of like CineD and people that have like done tests and stuff, and it's pretty close to the A7S III if I remember correctly. And that's a great thing, because the A7S III is a fantastic camera. It's got a lot of dynamic range, and the cool thing is like that's kind of like my high speed, my 120p camera if I need that. We'll just use the A7S III for that, and I know that I'm gonna get like similar highlight roll off and similar dynamic range to the Komodo, which really helps with getting a consistent look and all that kind of good stuff. But all that said, been really happy with the Komodo's dynamic range, and I've never really felt limited by the dynamic range of the Komodo. Next up is the form factor. It is that, you know, iconic cube form factor that RED cameras are known for, and I really like it. It's really good for balancing on gimbals and stuff like that, and that's really good. On the other hand, the bad part is for handheld work and stuff, you really do have to rig it out. So I've kind of got one dedicated to like gimbal work and stuff like that, which is a pretty stripped down Komodo, which is right there. And then my other one, I've got it rigged out with like a top handle and an outrigger handle and battery plate and all that kind of stuff, and big monitor and all that for like handheld and all that kind of good stuff. So that's kind of why I got a second Komodo, just kind of have best of both worlds, so I don't have to like tear the camera down for a gimbal. Kind of got it set up for, you know, pretty much every use case that I have. So been really happy with the form factor because of its modularity and being able to kind of set it up exactly how you want. All right, next up is RED Control, and this is like kind of twofold. One is being the app, and the other is like controlling from the monitor. So the app is awesome. I mean, you can control all the settings and everything from your app. You can monitor with the app and everything, and you can also unlock features that aren't built into the camera that you can kind of get through the app. Like one thing is being able to use face tracking autofocus, which is pretty sick and cool. It's not something that's built into the camera, but they were able to kind of unlock that using the app, which is really cool. Now the other thing with RED Control is using RED Control on my small HD monitor. So I have the small HD 702 Touch, and being able to just navigate and change all the settings on my actual monitor is really nice, instead of having to use that little touch screen built onto the Komodo. Just being able to keep my attention focused on my small HD monitor at all times is really nice. And honestly, I think the way you can change settings on the small HD is kind of nicer and a better experience in my opinion than using the monitor on the Komodo. So there are a number of reasons why I actually never invested in a DSCM2 camera system that honestly, for me personally, the Komodo checked all those boxes in a really good way. Number one, the price. It's way more affordable to get into a Komodo than a DSCM2 camera system, which is awesome. But with the Komodo, you don't have to use proprietary media anymore. You just have CFast 2.0 cards, which still recommend you getting approved media so you don't run the risk of getting corrupt files or card not working or something like that. You get a built-in lens mount. DSCM2 cameras didn't get that. get a built-in lens mount, built-in battery mount, so you can actually just, like, right out of the box, the Komodo is ready to go, as opposed to DSCM2 cameras or not. You had to get all kinds of different modules and monitors and this, that, and the other, and proprietary media to get it up and running. With the Komodo, just take it right out of the box, slap batteries on, lens, media, and you are technically good to go to start recording whatever you need to do. So you got those improvements, but you also have things like faster boot up time, faster black shading process, which is really nice. You also have that awesome REDCODE app that I just mentioned, which is really awesome to control all of your settings remotely, which is really nice. And then you also have a screen on the Komodo to be able to navigate through the menu system, something that didn't come on the DSCM2 cameras. And speaking of the menu systems with the Komodo, I no longer feel like I am using a camera that's running on a Windows 98 operating system. So there are a number of reasons why I did not invest in DSCM2 cameras, and the Komodo kind of answered all of those issues for me, which kind of really led me into buying a Komodo and then a few months later purchasing another Komodo. So that said, there are a lot of great things to say about the Komodo, but there are a couple of little minor things that I'm not so excited about with the Komodo. And the first thing has to relate to that screen on the Komodo I was just talking about, and that is the touchscreen capabilities. Now, it could be both of my units, but I almost always just use the buttons on the side, and thank God there are menu buttons and be able to navigate with the buttons, because I almost always somehow select the wrong menu item even when I touch the menu item on the touchscreen. So the next thing is autofocus. It's still in beta, and it is nowhere near autofocus that you find on Canon or Sony, or even like the new Lumix S5 II or something like that. It's okay, and it works in some instances, like talking head setups and stuff is usually okay, but it will still kind of hunt really quickly, especially I found with like my 15 to 35. For some reason, it just sometimes will just like lose focus real quick and try to catch on. So it's still in beta. I don't know if it's going to get any better. If it's going to be a significant improvement, then hopefully we can see that actually improve. If not, I would just take it out of beta and stop giving us hope for better autofocus, because right now it's usable like 20% of the time. So that's the only thing I have to say about it. It's nice that it has it, and when it works great, but it's not something that I rely on for any serious work. Next up is the record button. This is kind of silly, but I wish the record button was on the front of the camera as opposed to where it is right now, especially with the outrigger handle, or really any side handle where the record button is now. It's kind of awkward to get to. I wish that the record button was just kind of on the front of the camera, so you can just kind of trigger record right there. Now I have the outrigger handle on my handheld rig, so that kind of solves that problem, but it would be nice if there was a record button on the front as opposed to where it is right now. And the last thing is the cabled design. And what I mean by that is, one thing that I actually really loved about DSCM2 cameras was the fact that you could have a entirely cableless setup if you wanted to kind of run small. So what I mean by that is, with the battery module and the monitor and everything, if you didn't use like, wireless follow focus and all different kind of peripherals, if you're just using red stuff, like the monitor was completely cableless, and that was such a clean setup, and something I really loved about DSCM2 cameras that I wish kind of carried over into the DSCM3 and REDCODE camera, because I just love that clean setup. That's something I really liked about DSCM2 cameras, but unfortunately that does not exist, and I don't even think it's possible to even get that, at least on the Komodo. Now you may be wondering why I haven't mentioned SDI or Framerates, and that is simply because they've not been an issue for me. I did not buy the Komodo with the expectation of it being a high frame rate camera, simply because it wasn't marketed in that way. So of course we could all, love more frame rate options. I mean, who wouldn't want more frame rate options that they're given to us? But it's not something that I've really cared about, honestly, because I have an A7S III that can record in 4K 120 for whatever project that I may need that for. But mostly shooting at, 48 frames per second is enough for me. And if I'm in like the widescreen format, the 240:1 and 6K, getting to 50p, I believe, is plenty enough for pretty much any project that I've shot. And then with the SDI, yes, it is a process that you have to follow with 12G SDI, but it's not specific to the Red Komodo. But it's a pretty simple process, and if you go to Red's website, they have a simple process. And for me, the SDI thing really just has not been a big issue for me at all. I've never had a problem with it. I mean, knock on wood, I guess. But that's why I don't really see that as a con with this camera, because I've never really had a problem with it. So it's a pretty easy process. Just follow the protocol, and once you do it a few times, then you'll realize it's really not that complicated of a process. Once you do it, you're good to go, and it just becomes part of the camera setup process when you're getting ready for a shoot. Well, I've talked for entirely too long, and you've listened to me for entirely too long, so I think I'm gonna finish up here. Appreciate you watching, and hope to see you in the next one. Peace.